Welcome, everyone, to the Strand. Thank you, Hiroshi, for coming tonight, and thank you to the Strand for hosting us, and also to the folks from Damiani, the publisher, as well as if there's anyone here from artbook.com, who is the distributor of the books. This is the great institution here in New York for books, and we're very pleased to be here. This is the third time that I've had the privilege to sit here with Hiroshi Sugimoto and discuss a major body of work. There have been, this is actually the fourth title in an ongoing series of monographs, books about his work. The first that was published was the dioramas. Then Hiroshi and I had a conversation about seascapes, followed by his theaters book, and now tonight we're going to discuss his portraits. And we have some images on the screen that we'll be able to scroll through as we go. For the sake of the audience members who maybe are seeing or hearing about Mr. Sugimoto's work for the first time, or anybody that is joining us for the first time, I wanted to do a bit of a proper introduction to Sugimoto's work and his career. He was born in Tokyo, Japan, and in 1970 moved to Los Angeles to study photography at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. He then came to New York shortly thereafter and has been based in both New York and Tokyo since, and maintains really a studio here in New York, but has a lot of projects that have taken him around the world. He is best known for his highly formalistic photographic series of seascapes, movie theaters, the natural history dioramas, and his portraits of wax figures. In each of these ongoing series, which were begun in the 1970s, the artist's philosophical curiosities are focused on the nature of time. Present time, individual memories, the ancient past, and thoughts about the future all find their way into his work, as does the question of the duration of time as recorded by photography. One of the more important measures of an artist's career and their cultural relevance is the number and caliber of the public institutions that hold their work. In the case of Mr. Sugimoto, the list is both long and impressive and includes the collections of the Metropolitan Museum and the Museum of Modern Art here in New York City, as well as the National Gallery of Art in DC, the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, the Tate Museum in London, and on and on. Mr. Sugimoto received the prestigious Hasselblad Foundation Award for Photography in 2001. And in 2006, many of you may remember the mid-career retrospective that was at the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, DC. And the catalog from that show, which is now almost a dozen years old, was really the first sort of retrospective volume that we had that really, you had a chance to see Hiroshi's work sort of in depth. There were many catalogs of individual projects leading up to that, but that was really the best known book. In 2009, he was the recipient of something called the Premium Imperial from the Japan Arts Association, which is perhaps the most highly respected award offered to a living artist in Japan. It's quite an honor. Just last week, he was awarded the prestigious National Arts Club Award in photography here in New York City. And his interests and sort of familiarity with a range of art is apparent to a lot of people who have studied his work. He's done architecture commissions. He has worked on sculptures. His interest in photography is from the beginning of his career. He also has this interest in time that you see in his work is something that really is just it feels like a lifelong pursuit of his, to really think about and look at and tinker with the idea of time, and making objects, collecting objects, photographing objects that somehow get at this sense of time. And it sounds, on a certain level, it may sound trite, but I think there's a lot to unpack, and we have a little time tonight to do that. I'll mention that he's represented by some amazing galleries, Koyanagi Gallery in Tokyo, Frankel Gallery in San Francisco, and the Marion Goodman Gallery here in New York City. There's also going to be a major retrospective of his work in France this fall at the Palace of Versailles, and that is hosted at the time that France and Japan are celebrating 150 years of diplomatic relations. So it's a real honor that your work will be there. It opens in October, and if you visit in November, you'll also have a chance to see Perry Photo, which is the great photography fair that happens at the same time. So I want to start this evening's conversation by reading a short paragraph from the current book, the present book, by the main essayist, who is Maria Morris Hamburg. And since you weren't allowed into this room without purchasing a book, you'll all get to go home and think of this as the beginning of the reading of the essay that you'll all do as you lay in bed tonight. So she says, let's start with the cover. Here is Napoleon, caught in a surprisingly inward moment. Our eyes scan his sensitive features, his medals and epaulettes, and the other rich details of his military uniform. And for a second, we believe that this photograph of the man is the genuine article. But something is awry. The man clearly existed, yet there is something odd about seeing this giant of history so undefended, close, and present. And then it dawns, Napoleon never stood before a camera. He died some 2 decades before photography was invented. What is this then? Some have thought it is a photograph of an actor posing in costume. Others propose that it is a hyper-realistic painting of Napoleon. In fact, it is a photograph of a wax figure from a mold taken of Napoleon's face in 1801 and refined with details and hair and costume, copied from paintings and drawings made by Jacques-Louis David and other artists during Napoleon's reign. It is a nest of representations, melding visions from different eras and media, fabricated for 20th century display and photographed by a 21st century artist. How in the world did you start photographing wax figures?
Well, I just went to Madame Tussauds in London, and I was amazed. Wow, this is as good as real. Or, you know, it looks so fake, but using my technique with 8x10, I can really make it believable. Because I've done the dioramas already, so the same diorama technique can be applied. And then I had my visions. Well, this is as good as real.
Yeah. How many of you, I should have said spoiler alert when I announced that it was wax portraits in the opening. How many of you realized before tonight that this was a wax portrait? Okay, so a handful of you. You're a bright crowd. I should have assumed. It's true that if this had been a figure like, for instance, Albert Einstein, there were many figures that you photographed who existed during the time of photography. Yeah. And it's true when you first look at them, you think, wow, what an amazing portrait of this person. Tell us a little bit about that technique. How had you photographed them?
There are even the Madame Tussauds. I did a two session, and the first one was, well, I didn't ask the museum to. Well, I got the permission, but the way they said it. So the proper writing was done by them. So I just photographed as it is. And then after like 3-4 years later, I decided to take it more seriously.
Maybe we'll come back to that.
That time,
next question.
Yeah, this was the first session, and this is a famous Chamber of Horrors.
Right. So,
and then the second, now you cannot see it because it's some kind of a political issues.
Right.
Or so the people who used to love this terrible scenes, murder scenes, famous murder scenes. This is Garrett.
The garret.
Spanish way of excusing. And amazingly,
well, I'm not, they're not in order, but we'll scroll through them.
yeah.
But so the Madame Tussauds, I mean, the history of Madame Tussauds dates back to the 18th century, the late 1700s.
During the French Revolution time,
Right.
Madame Tussauds used to serve for the king.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And there were
She
wax
was a
figures.
tutor, yeah. Wax
Exactly. And there were the rich and the famous and the generals and the
Right.
political figures.
Yes.
But there was this flip side, which was the Chamber of Horrors that served as a curiosity.
Right.
And so those were in London
Those are London, but this was made after the Madame Tussauds time.
Right.
There's a special British mentality or
right.
taste.
If you when you flip through the book tonight, there are famous murder scenes. There are some of them have this staged quality of a tableau scene, not just the portraits.
So so those are the real things, the garret and everything that the Madame Tussauds company tried to purchase the entire model scenes actually to reconstruct. So they are trying to make it as it's a real thing. So it's the only thing fake is a wax figure.
Right.
So this was a direct continuation from my diorama series I did. But after I exercised this, then some portrait, I want to make it, I want to give my own lighting and with a proper dark background. So I negotiated with them. So I was given a straight, I think 10 days after the public closing, like 7 to 7 next morning, every night.
Wow.
Was spooky.
Wow, yeah. So this is a scene of the royal family.
Right.
This is kind of the way it's set up when you visit.
Right,
But
the first time.
As you said, so they let you in after dark, and you were able to then pose them.
I set up my own studio within Madame Tussauds with black drops with my special lighting unit. So I'm trying to recreate some kind of a classical painting, portrait painting, like a Rembrandt writing kind, with proper reflector, so that I don't lose any shadow quality or highlight. So no, this is from the first. This is a different spot.
Yeah.
But so I was receiving the service from the Madame Tussauds, so I can name anyone. Henry the King, please.
Right.
They bringing the King Henry.
Wow.
Here and okay, first wife, please. That's first wife. So that's how it went.
Right.
Yeah.
So this what was it that so when we talked about the dioramas, this aspect, are you familiar with his work with the dioramas? So that just to briefly recap what those sort of give you. Hiroshi was in the Museum of Natural History here in New York, and you've probably all visited it, and you have everything from there's prehistoric times. You have a sort of portrait of early man, all the way through these different scenes of polar bears and hyenas and the different places around the world. And it was a sense of if you couldn't travel the world, this is what the world looks like. And it's these backdrops with painted backdrops with taxidermied animals. And so the photographs then, those scenes were made, I think, mostly in the 30s and 40s. Is that right?
1930s, I think.
1930s.
Under the WPA project.
Right.
To save the artist.
Right.
So they send the painter to the Africa, wherever, and then scientists and scholars, the purpose is to spend the money for the artists.
Right.
So the artists try to spend as much time as possible. So it's turned out to be very, very, it's more like a Hudson River School painting sometimes. But it turned out to be very good painting.
Right.
Yes.
And those were mostly, so the paintings, here these artists and scientists have come back from all over the world, and oftentimes based on photographs, created this fake environment that was meant to look real, right? So from a photograph, from a real life experience to a photograph to a diorama, and then Hiroshi stands in front of it and makes a photograph in black and white of this scene. And there again, when you first look at them, you think, oh, there's a polar bear that just killed a seal. And then something, again, seems wrong. Something seems awry. And this quality was sort of, that was really one of your first, the first project.
That was first project. I came to New York in 1974, and first I took my tour, look around the museums, and I just got stuck there.
Right.
And something interesting going on I found. And it's a very hallucinogenic vision. Maybe spending like 3-4 years in California, I used to have a hallucinogenic visions.
Right.
Yes. That was a flower children movement.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I don't get into the detail, but so then I start looking at the diorama with one eye closed. So I pretending like I'm a single reflex camera.
Right.
One camera is only one eye. Then what's happened is you lose the sense of perspective.
Right.
Then it gives more realistic vision.
Right.
So that gave me idea. Okay, let's shoot it with 8x10 large format cameras, single eye. Then the people lose the sense of the depths.
Yeah.
Then it gives you more realistic vision.
Right.
People tend to believe whatever the photograph image is.
And on top of it, we've almost been trained to believe that a black and white photograph has this, quote, documentary feel. So here you are documenting a polar bear killing a seal or a hyena.
So the painting, colors of paint transfer to the black and white. It gives you more reality.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's this aspect of these things essentially exist both outside of time and within the present. So here you have a photograph from the Pleistocene. Some of the dioramas go back into the era of the dinosaurs, all of these previous stages of earthly development. And again, you know that there was no photography 50,000 years ago, just like you know that Napoleon existed before photography. So you have this aspect. I want to bring up something that's also in the book, and I want to ask you about your encounter with King Tut, King Tutankhamun. And
that was my high school time, yes.
Yeah, so going back before you spent time in New York in the museums, you had another very powerful museum experience.
Yes, in Japan, when the Tutankhamun show came, I waited for the long line, maybe a couple hours, and finally get to the Tutankhamun, the mask, and then the body itself. Yes. So the Tutankhamun face is a replica of the real face when he was alive, but the body itself it's dried out and it's mummied, and it's very scary looking. So I instantly figured out what this is 5,000 years probably, the passage from this face, head to the mask. It's just leaped. I instantly recognized the passage of the time, 5,000 years.
Right. So there was both the death mask, which was this gold object, as well as the actual mummified head, and that you recognize something in that passage of time.
Right.
And what was the impression of that mask? What was your thought?
I wanted to buy it, but it's impossible.
Why?
No, this is a kind of, I used to be collect many things, like models. Now, so at the end, I became the dealer of antiquity of Japanese in New York for 10 years. And I'm still keep buying so many things. So I'm the born the corrector, nature of my spirits. So the photography is also the correction of the reality. It's just something you cannot buy it, but I can correct my photography.
Right.
So that those are the correction of the people here as a portrait.
Right. Right. How is the experience of photographing a wax portrait different than photographing a living person?
I have so many requests since I published my portrait series. So super rich people call me, will take my portrait. I always say, please die first and be waxed and come back. But I did several live person because many people are living person but so waxy looking too.
Is that a quality? That's a quality that you have to have, is a waxy face.
If you look waxy enough, I will do it.
And what was the experience like? Why not photograph more people that are living? Because
the technical problem, the exposure time is usually 20 minutes. Okay, living people sit still. It's impossible.
Right.
So for the living people, I try to give a shorter exposure with maybe no, I cannot. No, it's a famous f/64 club. That's everything is sharp from corner to corner.
Right.
That's the quality I wanted to have.
Right.
Yes. So I'm still the club member.
Right. Still a member of the club. And I want to go back to. There's a picture here that we passed earlier. There was a time. I want you to tell us about the time that you photographed Jesus Christ at his dinner table. This is another. I mean, you'll have to really study this piece in the book because it's quite amazing. And you have this, you have this paradox in your head where it seems so real. The figures seem so three-dimensional, so volumetric. Everything, all the details are there. And you know that photography didn't exist. You know that this is not real. And
this I discovered. It's not only.
This is not Madame Tussauds, by the way.
No. I found this very, very local town in Japan. It's kind of hot spring sightseeing spot. And it's a very tacky, small wax museum exists. And it's at the backdrop painting is painted by some Mexican artist. And it's very, very weird. But the wax figure itself, I found it's very well made.
Right.
So I decided to redesign the backdrop, just a black, and then table setting. That's everything I arranged. I even asked Metropolitan Museum Department of Antiquity to borrow the first century glass.
Wow.
And they found it, but they already have one.
Right.
So instead I went to Bloomingdale.
Right.
And I found those plates. And so the posing and everything is obviously based on Da Vinci's painting, so it's very well done.
And how long did it take you to photograph this? Because it's in multiple panels, you had to move.
There's it's in a case, so there's a seal between each. Probably every 8 feet has a seal. So I have to place my camera in between the center of the seal. So that's how it's consisted of 5 panels in this case. So every place is some technical difficulty that I have to clear. And same as I found emperor, Showa Emperor Hirohito. In the same
oh, he was there,
museum.
right? That we came to later. Let's go through just a few more of these. This is...
what's her name?
Mae West.
Yes. This I found it in California, very remote place.
Oh, really?
It's very strange wax museum. Maybe it's no longer there. Lenin.
This is Lenin.
guillotine.
This is from Chamber of Horrors, the guillotine. The royal family.
Royal family.
Right.
Astro. This is the very interesting because of the Napoleon in the deathbed, and Madame Tussauds later on, they purchased the actual bed. So this is a real bed.
This is his actual
and
bed.
Then this jacket and everything is real.
Wow.
So only the body replaced.
Wow.
So they're trying to, as realistic as possible, they're trying to purchase everything from the Chamber of Horrors as well. So this show, right after the Napoleon died, and then the Madame Tussauds in London, she made this wax.
Right.
And it turned out to be very, very popular show. And then Duke of Wellington was living in London that time. He used to come and look at this Napoleon's deathbed. In a lifetime, they never met.
Right.
Yes. So only the wax museum. So Duke of Wellington encountered Napoleon. And then after Duke of Wellington died, Madame Tussauds made Duke of Wellington as a wax.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a bit of a scene that didn't exist in real life, but
right.
And
but once Napoleon was wax,
right.
Wellington was live.
Right.
So I'm asking them now, please, after my death, please make my wax figure photographing this scene with 8 by 10. So it's a 3 layers of time.
Yes, three ways. Emperor Hirohito.
Elizabeth Taylor.
Liz Taylor, yeah. Was this also in California?
In California, yes. So King Henry VIII.
King Henry, yeah. And then these are the 6 wives.
Right. The first wife, Catherine of Aragon.
Right.
So they are all based on painting, especially Holbein's famous painting of Henry VIII. So once it's painted and transfer the image to the wax, and then now being photographed.
Right.
Yes. This is Anne Boleyn.
Whoops. Whoa, wait. Sorry, the button's going crazy. Anne Boleyn.
Jane Seymour. Anne of Grave. Howard.
What about the things like the book and her jewelry? Are these facsimile reproductions?
I think so. It's not real. The jewelries are not real.
Yeah.
Of course.
This is
what's
Rita Hayworth?
No.
Sorry.
Let's look at
we
the
don't
book.
know. Somebody, it's in the book. Jean Harlow, yeah.
Yes. Jean Harlow, yes.
I think that might be it. Oh no, here we go. Oh, it's the buttons. It's not. There we go. Dali.
Dali, yes.
Sophia Loren, in a scene from a movie, no?
Yes. Norma Silla. I am making a life-size print of this.
So they'll all be life-size?
Yes, because to be present at the Versailles.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Of course. Duke of Wellington.
We'll go through just a few more here. Yeah.
What's his name?
Yeah. Valentino.
Yeah, Valentino. Right.
Here we have the great artist, Rembrandt.
This was taken at Madame Tussauds in Amsterdam.
Oh, in Amsterdam.
Yeah. And Voltaire.
Voltaire, right.
So this Voltaire and also Benjamin Franklin, those two figures were actually the casted from the real person in the late 18th century.
Wow.
Yeah, Voltaire used to serve for the Louis XV at the Versailles.
Right.
So Madame Tussauds actually took it. So they're still using the original cast. So this is most likely his portrait of that time. This is the serial killer.
Right.
Nice looking guy.
Right. This is Mondrian.
This is a Lindbach kidnapper.
Right.
Yeah.
And so with the ones from the Chamber of Horrors, are you lighting these as well?
No.
These were lit as they are.
And those are the real machine that they bought.
Right.
Yes.
John Paul, Pope John Paul.
Right. Queen.
Catherine.
Yeah. Elizabeth first.
So when it comes to portraiture, are you finished? Is there more? Do you feel like this is an ongoing project still?
If I can find something interesting, I may. So all the series, I don't say that this is finished.
Right.
Yes.
Right. When it comes to these, I mean, so much of the work that, especially the diorama series and the portraits, they tie into work that other artists have done.
Right.
So you're photographing the wax work that was done by an artist. How do you? It also ties into what you are doing with your architecture project, which will be the next book.
Photograph of the architecture series. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you think about photographing the work of someone else?
Well, I feel like I'm always trying to give facelift.
Facelift,
to especially architecture,
right.
architect. Trying to get the vision of the architect visions when they first capture the images. But at the end, when the building was built,
right.
it isn't as good as he first thought. So
Right.
it's make it out of focus, and this is like a dream-like visions.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
All the surface, all the mistakes is
Right.
softened.
Yeah, softened. Yeah, yeah. And in the case of the portraits, they really do feel like you're trying to light them and animate them in a way. I mean, that initial sort of reflection by Maria Morris about that piece where you have a moment where you feel like we're privileged to see Napoleon in a kind of self-reflective moment, but it's just wax. It's not. There's no self-reflection happening here. Is that conscious? I mean, you're trying to make a portrait of the person as you imagine them, or?
Well, this is it's all fantasized image.
Yeah.
The history we create, it's nothing to do with the real history. It's the image of the person. So we create the image of the person later on. Nothing to do with the actual person, I think.
Right.
So, so the photography as well. We're trying to make as much look like image. So, and the painter also fantasized the images also.
Right.
Rembrandt painting of the Henry King Ace, and not the Rembrandt, Holbein, is the most expected image that people want to see. So I try to make it more brush up, to make it more like a fitting to the public image of the figures, Henry the Ace.
It's curious that these are were essentially made as entertainment in a way.
Yes,
I mean, it's a way to see a person that you may never see in real life. And the way you talk about that, I think in a way, every time, I mean, we all have pictures of ourselves that we like. And there are a lot of pictures of us that exist that we really don't want to see because we don't want to imagine that we actually look like that, right? So I think everybody on the planet has one or two pictures where they just look like amazing. And you know which ones they are, and you use those, and that's what goes on your Instagram and all of that. And but I mean, it's kind of this. It is this aspect of photography. So there is a fantasy portrait. There's both a freezing in time, and also a sort of perpetuating of time, and that's very curious.
But the Napoleon it's only 2 decades before the photography invention. So
Right.
Well, I wish that we had real photos of Napoleon, but the famous painter David portrayed the famous, the Napoleon riding on a white horse.
Right.
It's all fantasy.
It's all fantasy. Yeah.
But at least before, the same as David. David is a friend of Madame Tussauds, actually.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So, so this portrait was amazing that Madame Tussauds actually took the cast from the Napoleon.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And did Madame Tussauds existed during Napoleon's lifetime? Not with a wax of him, but there were other figures. Would he have been aware of just the whole phenomenon of wax figures?
Well, she survived during the revolution time, and she, of course, she served for the royal family. So she was caught in the Bastille for a while.
Right.
She may be able to the crucified or guillotined.
Yeah.
But the only reason she was survived was for the revolutionary government. They decided to give the chopped off head to her so that she can make a cast out of this fresh head.
Wow.
Only that reason she survived.
Wow.
Yes. So it's a strange story.
Talk about workplace stresses.
So she was actually given Marie Antoinette's head, and also
She was given Marie Antoinette's head. Wow.
Yes, to be casted.
And there was like no HR department to call and say, I'm being triggered by this head right now. Yeah, amazing.
And then while she was arrested in the jail, the same room, there was Josephine. Later on, the Napoleons became wife, and they became a friend.
Oh, wow.
So after the Napoleon took over the power, Josephine called her, "Will you take my husband?" Portrait of the wax. That's how this was taken.
That's how that started.
There was a very precise the hand note and then diary exists by Madame Tussauds. That's what I checked it. Yes.
Wow. And so then after the revolution, she goes to England. She goes to London.
She felt some unsafe, so she exiled almost to London.
Right.
And then start the Madame Tussauds.
And she was very young when she went to London, no?
Only after she married to Tussauds, and she became a Madame Tussauds. But she had a different name during the revolution.
Right.
But it took many decades. Her show was a traveling show around the Scotland and Britain, and so she just moved to one place to other. But finally, she settled in the current place, and then became commercially successful.
Right. Wow. Almost. Yeah. So traveling news
traveling
show. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Traveling show. Interesting. Why don't we open it up to the audience for some questions?
Okay.
We have a microphone here. We can't see all the way in the back, but if anybody has any questions from the front to back, please. Hang on, we have one in the back, and then.
Excuse me.
Hi. I think your work is wonderful. The first work of yours that I saw were the seascapes. It was a thin volume that I probably got here many years ago. I just wondered what the inspiration was for that series of photographs.
Inspiration for the seascapes.
Oh, seascapes. The seascape started from 1980, and the wax portrait and diorama started from 1975 or 6. So after like 4 or 5 years exercise, I wanted to be more abstract in a way. But the theme I came to my mind as well. I want to take a photograph of the water and air, just two elements. So I started study from 1977. I went back to Japan to get my green card. And then I start investigating the waterfalls deep in the nature of Japan. And then during my practice of waterfall photography, I still have it. And then I decided to, well, let's make it simplified seascapes and the horizon in the dead center and water and air. And I thought this will never sell. Turned out to be the bestseller.
Did you think it wouldn't sell because it was just too simple?
That's too simple, and people may think, well, everybody can do it. But actually, it took many, almost 10 years for my technical clearance. Because 8x10 and then make processing and the perfect smooth, usually when it's clear day, always some kind of unevenness in the processing. So I have to invent a special processing machine to give 100% pure processing method. It took 10 years. The agitation system with moving, it's not.
You can get a lot of streaks with the developer in a large negative when it's just a clear area.
Right. So I found that later that it looks so simple, and it seems like everybody can do it, but impossible to do it. Only I can do it. Pre-fruit challenge.
A great technical challenge. And the thing to bring the question into this conversation about time, there's in the seascape photographs, there's never land or boats or...
That's very difficult things to find.
Difficult to find.
Right.
But the reason behind that is...
So as a photographer, but I wanted to be a conceptual artist. I have to come up with some kind of beautiful theory. So I gave myself the theory that if the first man appeared on the planet Earth and looking at the seascapes, this can be the scene that we can share with ancient people and modern man as I am. What can be shared, the same scenes? That can be the seascapes.
Right.
The land, we changed it. So, but the seascape can be the only scene that I can share with 5,000 years ago or 10,000
50,000
years. Yes, 50, back to the origins of human spirits, consciousness. So that sounds beautiful, reasonable explanation for the seascapes.
Yeah. Thank you. Another question. Two questions up front here.
Hi, I was just wondering, with respect to the lighting on these, especially when you were shooting the Madame Tussauds and so forth, did you do any sort of formal study of lighting, or are you applying any particular principles that say you were trying to model after Caravaggio or that sort of thing? I mean, were you trying to essentially riff on any of that?
Yes, of course I'm very aware of the original paintings, how it's lit. And in Napoleon's case, the David painting doesn't help me a lot because it's so kind of painterly scenes. But the Rembrandt case, I'm trying to make it as a Rembrandt-like, or the Renaissance painting. Also, the Holbein's painting, it taught me how it should be lit. So I'm trying to match. Right, it's not a strobe light. It's a tungsten, very traditional tungsten light, with huge diffuser to make it soft light. So in this case, the light source coming from the light, with many lights with diffuser in front.
Which also implies you need a long exposure.
Yes.
Yeah. You had a question.
First, I would like to say thank you for producing great work. I wanted to ask you, When did you decide to switch to the view camera, the 8x10, specifically for your work?
Right after I came to New York, so I decided to be an artist. So first I came to maybe commercial artist. I thought that I'm very well trained photographer. So the only way to make money is a commercial photography, I thought that time. But after I moved to New York and look around the galleries and minimalist painting, the jet, sculptures, down frames, light, the installation. So I really wanted to be a contemporary artist or conceptual artist. And then the medium-wise, what should I use? So I decided to use photography. So to make my photography as good as a painting or sculptures, I have to be highest level photography applied to the contemporary art field. So I instantly decided to buy the best camera, which is 8x10. I'm already trained as a 4x5, so I know basically how to use it. So that's how I started. So 8x10.
Please.
How much is your process changed from how has your process changed from the beginnings in photography to what you're currently doing in terms of equipment process, how much you control, and how much others do work for you?
No, not much changed since I started. My teacher is Ansel Adams' photography book. The volume of 5, it's prints and film, lighting, and he listed all the chemical formation for the development. And so I tested most of his formula, and I found out the D23. You cannot buy it. You have to mix it by yourself. So this turned out to be, technically, answer that. It's controlling the shadow detail and the highlights, there's a beautiful moonrise. So aesthetically, I'm very different, but the technical aspect, I owe him a lot. Yeah. I'm using the same kind of system.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here we are.
I was interested in your discussion of time, and I'm just wondering, particularly with the portraits versus seascapes and the other work you've made with dioramas, and your use of the glass or the lens, do you have any particular preference from whether it's Japanese, European, and the history of the lens and the glass that's actually helping you do what you do?
Well, naturally, I'm Japanese, so. But it's too easy to say that I'm under the Japanese influence. So, but when I was in Japan as a college student, I studied Marxist economics. So I learned, Kant, Feuerbach, this heavy-duty German philosophy when I was in Japan. But only after I came to California in 1970, many young people ask me whether I'm enlightened or not. So
That's when you became a hippie, right?
Yeah, I was a hippie, and then so I have to catch up as I look like a Japanese, and not knowing about Zen Buddhism is pity.
Right.
I catch up instantly. I studied seriously about Zen Buddhism, right. and yes. So I studied Eastern philosophy in California and Western philosophy in Japan.
And actually, I think that the threads of all of that is in your work. I mean, quite honestly, I think
yes.
you have this very sort of sensitive artistic side in the sense of you're aware of a lot, but there's a kind of rigor to the way you think about the work, and there is a real philosophy, I think, behind it. Any other questions?
We've got time for just a couple more questions.
Okay.
There's one back here.
One back here, and then one up front.
Hi. In terms of the decision of choosing the image for the cover, were there any other candidates? And also, do you have any other image that you were considering?
Image?
Yeah.
Well, Emperor Hirohito might be the cover, but well, sales point of view, I don't know. We as editors and everybody gathers and we vote.
Yeah.
So
Which image will sell the most books? That's
right. Yeah, that's most important. And fortunately, I'm just giving the show at the Versailles, so this was the jacket for this
Right.
book.
right.
For promoting the French market.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do any women have any questions? It's like all the guys talking. This could turn into like super nerdy lenses and apertures if we're not careful. Here we are. One and then.
I want to ask you about there's a print in the book of the Last Supper.
Yes.
And it looks like there's some marks and runes on it. Give the picture a little bit of.
Yes. That
like
was shown
painting,
at
like-
the Japan Studies show
Okay.
last year.
Yeah.
So there's like a painterly quality to
that
it.
was the Hurricane Sandy hit the New York City, and I had a set of Last Supper kept in my basement, and the Hudson River water came in and dipped into the Hudson River water with soil water, probably. And then after 3 days, it just came out, and then most of the products melted down. The Jesus Christ, half the face melted, and so I decided to like it. So I just dried very, very slowly. And took many, many months, and then it just came out interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the works, as you just heard, were submerged. They were in the basement, submerged in water, and some of them I think were, because it's a multi-panel piece, they were facing each other. So there were almost like these air pockets created, and when they were pulled apart and dried, parts of it were preserved and parts were destroyed. And as you say, it was. The final touch was an act of God that creates.
That was the show called Act of God that Frankel Gallery was shown last year.
Yeah.
But the image is not in this book. It's the before damaged image. It's only here. Yes. But the Japan Study catalog is listed. Yes.
One question here, and then. Oh yeah. The young lady here, and then we'll have one last one.
So there's an incredible consistency to your work and a strong philosophy from when you started. But I wonder, after working for so many years, is there something that, like, what is it that feels most important to you now that's different from when you first started out? What is the problem that you most want to solve after a career of producing really consistent work?
Well, the most severe problem is the lack of my paper. The Ilford Paper Company, British company, kept making my favorite papers only for me. They stopped making it for the market. But finally this year, they said no longer. I cannot make your paper. So I have about a 2 years supply now. So that's my life expectancy. As a photographer. And the Fujifilm is still making my film, but any minutes, you never know. If I were young, I tried to make my own Sugimoto brand paper and film, but that's the problem.
Maybe one last question here. Two last
We really
questions.
can only do one more.
Okay, one more. All
right, here we go.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, this book, I think it was a similar question I was asked before and so on, but this particular book, Portraits, what is your criteria and so on, like who goes into the book and who doesn't, so on? Like who's like not in the book and so on that you really wanted to, but it's not in there and so on? Like.
Well, the portrait-wise, it's mostly covered, including the live portrait. And so far, this is all I done, as portrait-wise. Yes.
Yeah.
But from now on, I may do portrait, but it can be the second edition can be printed maybe a few years later. You never know.
Great.
We're going to
Okay,
squeeze
everyone.
one more in there.
Oh, one more. Good.
Yeah.
Hi. I just wanted to know, besides photography and architecture, if you have another passion or hobby.
Another passion, the different...
Or a hobby.
That is not photography.
Well, I expanded my activity to architecture. I've been photographing architecture photography, but I studied a lot from what's wrong with the star architect job. So to host my show in a museum, and then I start designing my own space. So now I have an architecture firm in Tokyo with 10 licensed architects I'm hiring. I am the only person who has no license. So architecture job. I recently finished the Hirshhorn Museum, Washington lobby complete renovation. That was commissioned from the first government job, actually.
Wow.
Government paycheck I received.
Wow.
And then the sculpture garden of Hirshhorn Museum is commissioned me now. So this is the serious.
You have taxpayer funds now, so it is serious.
Yes. So this is $20 million budget.
Wow.
So it takes so much time now. So I don't care about my 2 years surprise photography over. I have enough jobs.
And you've done restaurants, you've done...
I've done restaurant designs, many projects, one in New York, big apartment, and one house in California.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also I published my cooking book last year in Japan, so I'm really into the cooking as well. And then performing arts.
Yeah.
I'm really into the performing arts. So the next year, September, at the Lincoln Center, I am bringing my own Bunrak Puppet Theater to Lincoln Center. And then next year at the Paris Garnier Opera, I'm commissioned to do the ballet piece as a producer. So I have so many things to do. I am getting more and more busy. I'm turning to 70 years old, but I always say I'm too busy. I have no time to die.
On that note, thank you, Hiroshi. Thank you so much.